What's up, YouTube fam? Robbie C here, and today we're going to talk about the top 5 reasons that you might be bad at putting. But before we dive in, we got to ask the most important question of the day. How you doing today, Whitney? Are you having a good one?
So catch me if I fall.
I play a lot of rounds with amateurs and newer players, and one of the things that comes up quite often is the idea of being good at putting, and there are phrases that I hear used all the time. Oh, I can't believe I missed that putt. Dude, if I would have just made all of my 20 footers, I would have had an amazing round. Dude, I just cannot be missing putts like that. It's so interesting how you approach putting and really just how you approach sort of the game in general, because if you talk to people who are really good at putting, or even folks that would say putting is sort of a strength of theirs, most often they're gonna tell you putting is super easy. Like, it's just probably mental getting in the way that's holding you back from making putts. What I find interesting about that is that some of the same arguments that we use to say putting is just sort of that mental exercise, we really can apply to so many other aspects of the game. Driving is just finding a consistent throwing form and using it over and over again. Just like putting is the same stroke over and over again, just making micro adjustments based on how high the basket is in relativity to you and how far away it is. Upshots are really just the same exercise over and over again, just making micro adjustments along the way. You can see where this sort of catch-22 comes. I think that oftentimes people want to oversimplify putting because there is a degree where we need to simplify it, but also there are just a host of, I want to say, is excuses the wrong word? We'll say reasons that people not only don't succeed at putting, but these same reasons can often be holding them back from ever improving at putting and sort of raising that ceiling. So today's video is pretty straightforward. I've got 5 tips or things that I feel like are reasons people are bad at putting. And I want to tell you why I think they're holding you back, why they're keeping you from improving, and what you can do to overcome them. First and foremost, you don't practice. I've talked about this before in pretty much every single putting video that I put out, but I can understand for lots of people that practicing your putting is not a very glamorous task. Getting out there and grabbing a stack of putters, just practicing the same motion over and over again, doesn't feel near as exciting as getting out there, playing around, and seeing the disc fly through the air. But practicing is what allows us to sort of find that consistent stroke, which is what we need on the putting green. Being able to dial it in over and over again and commit and throw the same shot is huge. Now, like I said, these are reasons that you may not be good at putting, but also reasons that may be holding you back. Because you don't practice, it doesn't allow you to have consistency on the green, and therefore you probably aren't as good at putting as you could be. But you may be using this as a personal excuse of, well, if I do practice, I often find myself struggling to translate it to the course, and so even if I practice for, an hour a day for the week, I don't feel like I putt any better that weekend when I'm out in the tournament. And therefore you just write it off as a reason that you shouldn't have to practice because it doesn't really translate. And then the cycle continues to feed itself. You aren't practicing, therefore you're gonna get worse at putting, which is gonna make you frustrated. And then eventually you'll find yourself going back to a world where you do practice putt, but then you feel like it doesn't improve. You can see the dilemma. So our solution to overcoming tip 1 is to surprisingly, just get out and practice. I mentioned this in a video that was posted earlier this year where I spent 30 days in a row practice putting. They weren't necessarily for 30 minutes at a time. It wasn't throwing 100 putts at a time. It was just getting out every single day trying to practice, rain or shine. And if I really felt like the conditions weren't that great, then it was just practicing putting indoors. If I didn't have an indoor practice putting session, it's just standing in the room and putting into pillows that are laying on the bed. Now, personally, I prefer to try to get 10 putters of the same plastic. These are all Birdie blend putters that are wizards, and they are in basically the same weight. And so this allows me to make my practice putting more effective, because when I get out there and putt on the course, I know what the hand feel feels like. It's the same putter every time in the same plastic. Also, as a side note, we did actually drop a new stamp over on Foundation's website, which is the Robbie C. It's the big logo stamp, and it says, "Hope you have an amazing day, and make it fantastic for someone else too. Birdie blend wizards." Now, final caveat, if you're in the self-defeating cycle of it just doesn't work, I would argue that part of why the practicing isn't working is because we're not practicing the right thing. but we'll talk about that a bit more in number 5. The second reason that you might be bad at putting is spiraling. Mental spiraling is something that happens to players in all facets of disc golf, but on the putting green especially, there are a couple factors that can instantly sort of throw you off or throw you into the pit of despair that you don't want to be at when it comes to putting for the round. So when I play disc golf with friends, I turn into a little bit of a savage in terms of making jokes and things like that. And so played disc golf with a friend, Ryan, recently, and he lined up. He had about a 18 to 20 foot putt leaning out here, and he had gotten here for birdie. No one else was remotely close. I jokingly walked over to his wife and his friends that were playing with us, and I said, what do you guys think? Does he make the putt or no? And of course, his wife, being a great human being, said, yeah, I definitely think he does. And his friend was like, no, I don't think he does. And I was like, yeah, I think I'll side with Andrew. And sure enough, Ryan lines up the putt and airballs it right. It was, by his own admission, not great. Definitely a putt that he felt like he should have made during the round. And of course, it starts getting to his head. Now, every single time he lines up a putt throughout the rest of the round, he's staring at it. And rather than staring at the basket, mentally, he's thinking to himself, don't airball it right. This sort of spiral can make it so much harder to putt, because now we're not only not aiming at the basket like we're wanting to, we're also aiming to not miss right. That spiral is hit, and even for myself, I'll have days where I'll go to throw putts and they'll pop and go hard to the right. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, we just can't let it pop right. We've actually doubled the focus points on a putt, which is not what we want to be doing. The second type of spiral I see is an equipment spiral. We play one of my local courses, Civitan, that has old chain stars on it. It's like Discraft's first iteration of the chain star, and they look very similar to these mocks. Those chain stars have been the bane of many players' existence on that course because it feels like really good putts can come in and then just get spit out of the basket. So when they added new baskets to that course, I was super excited, and I know several people were super excited because they no longer had to worry about great shots being ruined by a sort of tap and putt on those baskets. I walked up with a comfortable lead on the rest of the card, and I had a tap in about here. So threw my putt, basically center on the pole, middle height, not high, not low, anything like that. And my range at that putt right there that I just threw went into the basket and then just immediately fell back out into my hands. This caused me to take a bogey on the hole instead of getting a stroke, essentially on the hole card. And at that point, I'm thinking to myself, well, how am I supposed to trust the basket at all? If the basket won't accept tap-ins, what am I supposed to do when I have a 15 or 20 footer and I'm further away? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, gotta give it confidence. See, like that one, equipment succeeds. Second one, equipment looks at it. And so you think to yourself, you start having these issues over and over again of lack of confidence in the basket, which means that I'm telling myself, okay, even if I throw good putts, there's a chance they don't go in. And if you're thinking that, you're gonna lower the confidence of the putts that you're throwing anyways. Spiraling takes you to a very dark place in disc golf and makes it very difficult for you to succeed throughout the rest of the round. Because like I said, we have doubled our focus points, and that is just not ideal. So how do we avoid spirals? I think one of the best ways that we can avoid spirals is to go probably the Ted Lasso route, memory of a goldfish, and try to forget about it. But often what I like to try to focus on and how I sort of overcome spirals is thinking to myself, rather than focusing on what went wrong, what went right? For instance, if we go back to Ryan's airball moment, what went right? Did it have the pop to be the right height? Absolutely, it did. It was chain high, it was just an airball to the right. So I'm telling myself, rather than, hey, don't airball again, I really liked the pop we gave on that putt. Let's bring that same level of commitment next time. On the equipment spirals, what I'm trying to tell myself is, hey, that was a really good putt. It was centered on the pole. Let's make sure that we're doing that over and over again and focusing on the positives, because if we're going to spiral, we can even spiral in a positive direction, which I think a lot of people don't realize. Now, this next one is one of my personal favorites because I think especially when people putt indoors for the first time, they don't realize how far distances actually are, which is exactly what I think is holding you back, is you don't understand how far away from the basket you actually are. So for lots of people, and putting statistics included, 11 feet and in is considered bullseye. So let's see what 11 feet looks like from this basket. This is 11 feet away from the basket. I feel like as a 6'3" guy, as I come out here, it's just very easy. I have to give very minimal effort to get the putter into the basket, right? This is an 11-foot putt. That is arguably, quote, tap in range. Some folks though, if you're not 6'3", you don't have a consistent putting stroke. These are the putts that you're telling yourself, I feel like I have to make these over and over again. But if we've spiraled and we've let ourselves get in our head, we're not focusing on just putting the disc in the basket, this is where that can get really difficult. Tossing a piece of paper into a trash can or tossing your trash into the trash can after you finish your meal. Those are the types of shots that most often you just kind of go brain off, throw it in. But we've all seen before where you're trying to throw trash into a trash can and you miss and you're like, dadgummit. So you walk over and you pick up the trash and you put it in the trash can. We miss simple shots like that all the time, so it's not surprising that we miss putts. But if this is 11 feet, I want to go ahead and walk you to 15 feet. Now I've watched people who are competent in MA2, they are good intermediate disc golfers, step up to this range and call this a tap in. This is, they're saying, oh, I landed inside the bullseye because they're at this range right here at 15 feet. Now, if you're a good putter, should this still feel like a tap in? Sure, obviously we just went 5 for 5 there. But you can already see the differences between me saying, oh, hey, I just need to make all of my 20 footers. And they're looking at this and saying that this is a tap in or this is a bullseye. And they're placing themselves as if they are closer to the basket. Now that's certainly gonna come in more on tip number 4, but you can sort of get where we're going. Now here's where we start to talk about the extremes of things. This is 11 feet, so let's go 12, 13, 23, 24, 25. So from here, I'm 25 feet away from the basket. Me personally, as a very competent putter, who is someone who, like, the only reason I feel like I can compete at the local MPO level is because of my putting. At 25 feet, I am just outside of what I would consider my comfort circle range. These are, I believe, from this distance, at 25 feet, I don't think I'm inside my comfort circle anymore. I don't think that I'm supposed to make 85 to 90% of my putts. There you go. I've already broken the trend. But this is actually 25 feet away from the basket. Lots of folks think this is circle's edge. Because they think that they're at circle's edge and they're super far away from the bucket, that can sort of lead to some misconstrued ideas of their proficiency on the putting green. And here's why I believe not knowing how far away you actually are from the basket matters. If you're going through rounds and you're looking at actual 25 to 30 foot putts and you are overcompensating, believing that you are way closer than you actually are, this is going to lead to mental putting fatigue. This misconstrued information is how you get to the end of the round and you end up at Tournament Central on a tournament day, and you're telling folks that if you would have just made all of your 15 footers, well, you'd be in the lead right now. When in reality, when we go back and look at your putts, you actually didn't even have that many 15 footers. You had several 25 footers that you were trying to call 15 footers. But Mr. YouTube man, that just shows that I'm so comfortable on the putting green that I was confident that I was going to make those. I'm not entirely convinced that it works that way. We talked about how practicing doesn't really feel like it translates to the course. One of the best things you can practice is practice your putting at different distances. And when you step up to putts, just walk it off and see how far out you actually are. Now, the fourth one is an interesting one, and I think this is probably one of the biggest reasons that people who start getting decent at disc golf actually hit a wall on the putting green towards their improvement, and that is quite simply overconfident in your skills. Now, how do we settle this narrative between I need to be confident in my skills because I can't walk up unconfident to a putt, and yet if I'm overconfident, what it's going to do is create that putting fatigue that we mentioned earlier of allowing me to not give myself proper grace on putts that I really am not as consistent at making as I think I am. It's hard to argue that being super hard on yourself about things that you shouldn't be hard about yourself on doesn't detract from your overall performance. Now, the two examples I'll use here is I played around with a friend and he had about a 25 to 28 foot look for a birdie attempt. He missed it, it didn't go in the basket, and he walked up to me after and said, oh, I really squandered away that opportunity. And I said, did you though? I mean, that was like a 25 to 28 footer, and you already said that you're like not comfortable on straddle putts. Why are you like being hard on yourself for missing that putt. And having someone else give him the permission to be okay with, you know what? That may have been too high of an expectation, often can alleviate the stress of putting throughout the rest of the round. It led to a conversation about how if I was in that same scenario, I feel like I have to give it a really good bid and a really healthy bid. But even then, I know that 25 to 28 feet is outside of my comfort circle. So while I may have a 60% chance of making that putt, a 75% chance of making that putt, it's nowhere near 85 to 90%. And therefore, I have to give myself a little bit of grace on missing that putt. My second example, and I told him I was going to mention him, comes from one of our most referenced students. We love you, Wes. Now, context for Wes. Wes has been with the Birdie fam for an incredibly long time and is one of the students that I've worked with the most in my time of being a coach. Most of our work has been on the mental side of things because Wes definitely has the skills and proficiencies to beat so many folks. In fact, I'd be willing to bet that if I put Wes against 85% of the people that regularly watch these videos, I think Wes has a fighting chance of beating most people because Wes is a great disc golfer. But Wes also knows that he's a great disc golfer and his body doesn't always allow him to execute at the level that he wants to. And thus, Wes has this monster on his back of overconfidence at all times. This is just who he is as a person, is that he is a very confident human being. So to read a message from the man himself, in my head, putting is the thing that I am most consistent at and is the thing that is most in my control. So if I hit dead center cage from 25 feet and didn't get a wind drop, I get frustrated. Or if I could feel the error in the stroke. Like this weekend, I had one that immediately when it left my hand, I knew was low. The disc just slipped out 0.5 seconds early and didn't have the power I usually give it. These are controllables, and when I mess them up, there's no excuse. So to go back to what we said at the beginning of the video, I think so often, because Wes is a good putter, we can sort of overemphasize what's happening on the putting green and sort of underemphasize the controllables and things that we have elsewhere. If the approach shot maybe hadn't slipped out a half second earlier, you may not have been so far from the basket. We have to lean into our strong parts of our game and really believe that we can control those the most. That I totally understand. But something I think that people often overlook, especially folks who play in ratings and tournaments and things of that nature, is that our rating, especially if you play a lot, can be very indicative of our skill, most often our consistency. Ratings do not really show what our ceilings are, and they certainly don't necessarily show what our floors are. We may have a round that falls into our upper third, and we may have a round that falls into our lower third, but most often, if you have a lot of data being put in because you're playing a lot of rounds, it's going to show you a very consistent average. But where this overconfidence comes is that we often expect to be living in our upper thirds, and in reality, we are not able to consistently execute at that level, which is why our average is about here. And something we have actually proven on the channel before is that if you want to play 900 rated golf, all you have to be able to do is throw 250 feet with some accuracy, as well as make all of your putts inside of 20 feet. And I know when I put a tomb in Wes's hand, he can throw 250 feet with accuracy. But if we think about the quote that we just read, when he's at 25 feet, he's expecting perfection because it is the most controllable part of his game. And according to ratings, he doesn't need to be making 25 footers. He just needs to be making 20 footers. Now I say all of this about Wes, not because I'm trying to dog on him, but because I know and love Wes, and I think Wes would want everyone watching this video to not find themselves in a boat where you feel held back from your expectations. Wes is one of the kindest people that we have in the Birdie fam and gives on a daily basis in helping people better their games. So I want to see some love in the comments for Wes, especially from Birdie fan members. When you're overconfident on the green and you're having a bad day, you don't look at it as a place that you could improve and get to start making those 25 and 30 footers more consistently. You're already there if you're overconfident. So you can't improve to that point when you believe you're already here. And when you are actually putting in the time and the work to get there, it doesn't feel worth it because you just feel like you're meeting your expectation instead of thinking, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is where I'm supposed to be. And when I put in the time and the effort, I can sort of feed that and know that I'm hitting these things consistently. And therefore, when I start making 25 footers more consistently, I get to embrace that that is actual growth and actual improvement, which can often be fuel to the fire to help you become a better player and a better putter overall. And finally, our fifth and final piece that I think holds people back on a consistent basis from becoming a better putter is no routine. We have talked about this so many times on the channel, but I believe that if you find a routine in disc golf when you are feeling off, when things are feeling bad, when you are airballing, all of the things that we've discussed before can be improved by having a routine. So if I'm someone who doesn't practice that often, then I probably don't have that much of a consistent routine to my putt. Therefore, the slightest variables are gonna throw it off. And then if you're feeling overconfident, and you are an overconfident player, because you have your routine, you've practiced your routine, and you know where your routine is most effective from. And not only that, but if you're off just a little bit that day, instead of spiraling into the other things, because you are confident in your routine, you're not overconfident, and you have figured out, hey, this is what my putt feels like. This is when it feels good. This is when it feels bad. There are certainly days that I walk up as a very confident putter, even understandably at times, overconfident. So trust me, I'm coming from a place of vulnerability here, saying that this is my biggest boon on the putting green as well, is overconfidence. So I have to constantly put myself in check. But there are days where I almost never, it feels like, will come onto the course and just roll straight into hole one. I always want to throw 3 to 4 putts, because I can quickly tell, okay, is the putt feeling good today? Is the putt feeling bad today? Because if the putt feels a little shaky at all, instantly I can put my confidence in check and say, okay, we're gonna have to focus up and focus in and really lean on our routine today, because the motion itself is not feeling there. So the confidence is sort of leaving. Let me just be confident in my routine and let the practice take over. Once again, when it comes to putting, you guys know, it's not even like a soapbox. It is just something I'm super passionate about, and helping people find their confidence out there. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope that you maybe found a tip that you have been held back by, that you've been using or leaning on, and it's just put a hard ceiling on your improvement. And I hope that this helps us blast through on the other side. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Please make it fantastic for someone else too. Let us know in the comments what really stood out to you, or what you feel like is something we missed. But for now, we're gonna leave you with the birdie.